if anyone dropped a pin, in the course of the prolonged silence that resulted from the interpretation of the king's dream, the sound will be quite loud. The strange silence continued to permeate the atmosphere of King Elenpe's palace. With my head bowed down as a sign of submission to him, I kept on wondering what was going on in his mind. I hope he's not planning to execute me, I said in my heart, and a sudden fear gripped my mind. There's no human being that will hear such detailed preview of the future about himself and his lineage and will not be shaken, even if his heart is made of flint. I also momentarily wonder what is going on with Bagudu and the king's guard waiting outside. I remembered we saw some emissaries when Bagudu and I were being ushered into the king's palace. Despite the fact that I was afraid, some thoughts started flashing through my mind. This seemed to lighten up the idea that I earlier had. For a split second, it was as if some elements in the second dream of King Elenpe of Ososaland, which Bagudu relayed to me when we were both in the prison, jumped out and got suspended in space before me. I saw the hourglass, the book that was later opened, and the key. Your Highness, I think I have an idea of what can be done to jumpstart a turnaround. Immediately, King Elenpe said. Rise up and tell me. I then raised up my head, and after standing up, I said. My father, Attila the Great Hunter, has a wise saying that he is known for throughout our village. He is fond of saying, there is always a way out. He has a highly predictable tradition way of pausing and afterwards said, there is still hope for a tree that fall down and is rotten. So Your Highness, there is still hope. King Elenpe looked at me with a facial expression which indicated he is interested in what I am saying. Your Highness, I continue, in the second dream which you had, as Bagudu relayed it me, there are 3 elements there that may likely help out. The first is the hourglass, followed by the book that was initially locked but was later opened, and lastly the ancient key used in opening the book. Your Highness, I remembered vividly that I have seen the hourglass before, with an old man in my village when I was much younger. His name is Wonom, but unfortunately he is dead. However, he left all his property for Ananti, the only daughter that he had. A major challenge is that Ananti was among the traders that were captured by the slave traders and taken away. I was fortunate to be sold at the slave market to my master, who later sent me to the king's prison. My offense was that I mistakenly broke an ancient ceramic vessel while cleaning the house. I was later told that the ashes that poured out on the floor, which I swept away, was the ashes gotten from the cremation of his father. Your Highness, if the location of Ananti can be known, we can have access to the hourglass with her. I am very positive that she was taken by the slave traders. Without wasting time, King Elenpe called one of his guards to go immediately to the house of Olomoni, the one known in the land for slave trade business, and tell him that King Elenpe demand for the release of one of the slave girl with her whose name is Ananti. Within an hour, the king's guard came back to the palace with Ananti. She was dressed in the traditional bridal attire and was looking very pretty. She cast a glance at me and smiled as she was ushered into the presence of King Elenpe. Why is she dressed in a bridal attire? King Elenpe asked. The king's guard replied that she was about to be sold to a rich merchant from a distant land. Immediately Ananti kneeled down and bowed her head in obeisance to King Elenpe. In a very rough tone, King Elenpe said, Rise up. I was told you have an hourglass in your possession. I need it immediately for something very important. She cast an angry look at me for a split second and then looked at the king. She bowed her head again and said, Your Highness, it's true that one of my father gave me the hourglass and some other things before he died, but the hourglass is not an ordinary one. Few days before he died, he took me to a forest by our village called Obes and hid the hourglass inside an old tree whose frontal part has the shape of a human face on it. My father then told me that I must remain a virgin in order for me to access it because it has strange powers. He said if I eventually get married, I must remain faithful to my husband, and in my old age, I must pass the hourglass to my first daughter. He said so must it be done from generations to generations. King Elenpe did not allow her to finish before interjecting and saying the hourglass would be of no use to her if he behead her now and proceed to wipe out her village. He ended by saying he need the hourglass immediately. Ananti faithfully said yes to the king's request and nodded severally as a sign of approval. Afterwards, the king called on his bodyguard to get 100 of his chosen soldiers to follow us and bring back the hourglass from the place where it is hidden at Obe's forest. We left almost immediately and the journey took us 3 days. For over an hour after we took off, Ananti refused to speak to me because she was aware that I was the one that informed the king about it. We happen to be best of friends and there is nothing that we don't tell ourselves. In addition, I care a lot about her and was actually planning to ask her to be my wife after we returned from the business trip. Too bad we were kidnapped by the slave traders. Ananti was visibly angry with me, but much later when we stopped to rest for a while, and I told her the reason why the matter came up, she calmed down. She then informed me that the hourglass is a generational property that she is not supposed to part with. However, she is willing to sacrifice it for a just cause. If things end up the way the king saw it, her village is not safe too. After arriving at the forest, we navigate towards the tree and as she stood in front of the tree, without saying a single word, the hourglass came out of nowhere. She retrieved it. We were all happy and we journeyed back again for another 3 days before we arrived at the royal palace of King Elenpe. The king was visibly overjoyed as he held the hourglass in his hand. He subsequently asked me to excuse him and Ananti as he went in to keep it. After a while, he called Anen aside and they both had a long talk while we were kept outside the immediate presence of the king. She did not reveal what they discussed about, but I observed that when the king's guard called for me again and I was before the king, she was calmer and was very cooperative. King Elenpe then said, "While 2 of you and my guards were away, it dawned on me that there is an underground ancient chamber in the palace that has many books. After going there, I touched a wall and mysteriously I was ushered into a room that looked exactly like the one in my dream. Right there on the table I saw the book and I took it. So we have the hourglass and the book. The only element left is the key. How do we get the key?" King Elenpe asked me. I definitely did not have the answer, but I didn't want to own up. As I pondered over it, within few seconds, Ananti said, "Your Highness, I think I know what to do."